Hi, I'm Janeane. This is Outside the Box, and today I am joined by Dean Ian Williamson. And I know you're not Dean yet here at UC Irvine, but congratulations anyway.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Now, you are connecting from New Zealand, correct?
This is correct. I'm in Wellington, New Zealand right now.
So before we get started, I was just sharing with you some of the things I wanted to discuss. And I want to get into, not right this second, but advice you can give people that are coming out of college, that are from diverse backgrounds, that feel like, where am I going to find work right now? There's a pandemic, right? And am I going to be discriminated? When you were growing up in Chicago, what was it like for you finding work, finding opportunities, believing in yourself?
Well, I think, those are finding work, finding opportunities, believing in yourself, I think are three very different things. And maybe I'll start with the opportunity. And this is perhaps the most heartbreaking aspects of what I've watched over the last several weeks in terms of the rioting that you've seen in the United States. And that there were not as many opportunities in the neighborhood that I grew up in as there were in other neighborhoods. And I think that's really important to just take a step back and appreciate. So I remember very vividly when I was in high school, wanting to look for a job. And, you begin to realize that that opportunity for a 16, 17-year-old kid in the neighborhood where I was on the south side of Chicago was going to be very different than it would have been for a 16, 17-year-old kid in another neighborhood, say the north side of Chicago or a suburb of Chicago. And it wasn't the fact that I was going to be working any harder or easier than someone else. I was going to be searching as much, but that inequity right there began to really shape a lot of the option sets that you would have. And so that was a big thing. And just kind of understanding like, well, wait a second, I'm going out there every day, I'm looking for work, but is it going to be there? And so that did require, just more effort. And I think the other component around that when it comes to like your confidence in yourself is maybe not just confidence in yourself as much as it's the aspirations you would have for yourself. So I think one of the big defining moments for me was my mother. This was after my first year of college. I went to school and I came back and I desperately needed a job to sort of afford to go back to school. And my mother gave me, it sounds kind of funny at this time, but she gave me $5. And she said, I want you to go downtown and don't come home until you've taken your resume to every possible place in downtown. And she said, that's enough money for you to get a sandwich and bus fare.
I love it.
And, at that age, you're sort of like, okay, whatever, you're still somewhat obedient to your parents.
Yes.
And I did. And I went to every single bank in downtown Chicago and I walked in the lobby and I spoke to the receptionist and I said, are you hiring? And here's my resume. And as it turns out, I was very blessed in that there was a bank in Chicago that called me back up out of the blue. And one thing led to another. I ended up getting a job that summer working at a bank.
How old were you?
I would have been 18.
18
at that time. Yeah.
What a great experience, because I'm sure not a lot of people were going from business to business, and here I am, and here's my resume. And
yeah, this is sometimes not knowing any better is a good thing to have. I just thought, okay, my mother told me to do it. This will keep her off my back for a day. Let me go just do this. I put on my one suit and I went downtown and I walked around, and handed out resumes. And I think, part of that is, I think what I took from that was, I could have maybe just gone down the street and trying to find a job at a grocery store or something like that, but
you went for it.
Well, I think she just set an expectation.
Good.
Right. And I think that was the other thing that was a very big deal, is that if you don't have an environment that sets an expectation for you, then you don't try to even do those types of things. And it wasn't as much as whether or not I was going to be successful at doing it, as much as it was an expectation that's the type of thing I should do.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other part of that environment that I was speaking to, whereas what is the expectation that the environment has for you? And as an individual, I graduated from high school. I spent a year in college. That's, better than a person who's never been to college, I guess.
Yes.
And her expectation of me was, you should feel comfortable in those places like anybody else. Why would you not expect that you can work there?
I like that. Did you get that job at the bank?
I did get that job at the bank, and it
Nice.
was a really, and it's sort of like success begets success, right? So now I have a job on my resume that looks like a somewhat professional job. I'm studying business in college, and I've
Yeah.
spent the summer working at a bank. And I came back that year with a lot of confidence, feeling like I can be a business person. I've worked in downtown Chicago in a tall building at a
Yes.
major bank, and that begins to really shape your expectations also around, well, now I see why it's important for me to actually study,
Mm-hmm.
because this is something I can do for real. So those things, even though I probably didn't make that much money that summer, but
That's
those
okay.
things, yeah,
What was the recommendations? As I always say to
yeah,
my daughter, you
recommendations.
get a recommendation and it builds.
But more importantly, being able to walk into an environment and know you belong in that environment, and there's nothing intimidating about that environment. It's just an environment like any other thing. And so that was great for me.
That was great. And that confidence, that experience must have helped you land your next job.
Oh no, it begets success over and over and over again. And this is what I'm saying. It was more just the expectation that was set upon me
Mm-hmm.
more than anything else, because why would I not then apply for another internship? Why would I not consider taking on a more major role? These are all the things that I think my parents did a really good job of, and I think they had to really um, work hard around, because there were certainly a lot of other elements in the environment that were just not suggesting that that's something that I would be doing. And that's, to be quite blunt, solely because when you see a tall black kid walk in, the last thing you're thinking is business executive in many environments.
Yeah.
And for them, they were just really good at never allowing that to be off the table,
Great.
and just sort of really reaffirming that. So that kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier around those initial issues. I think that is a big step around that. And that role modeling effect, that expectations and the expectations that others have of you, but also that you project to others, makes a big difference.
So for somebody going into college, let's say a high schooler wanting to land some summer job, it's really tough right now.
Mm.
What kind of advice would you give them?
Well, I think I would recommend that those individuals put themselves out there.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of cases where individuals are going to feel uncomfortable. There's going to be people explicitly trying to lower the expectations they have of themselves, to pigeonhole them as to not being qualified or appropriate, or not feeling comfortable around them because of their background. And what I've learned is that's their problem.
True.
And you have to kind of walk into that situation being really confident around what you're willing to do. So are you willing to work? Are you willing to sort of commit to learning? And are you willing to sort of put yourself out in those environments? And that's tough, right?
Yeah.
It's certainly not the case that I want to make this a naive conversation, because it's impossible to be in a situation where people are consistently not looking upon you with the highest expectations, and that not have an impact on your mental well-being. But by the same token, you have to hold on to, what you know to be true, and your skill, your effort, and your background in no way, shape, or form puts you at a disadvantage. It's just about whether or not you're willing to go out. And I think one of the things that I've often appreciated in my life is to not be limited in how I perceive opportunity. So I'm in New Zealand.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly when I moved here, many people would have thought, well, why would you want to go there? And not to limit how I think opportunity comes in many sizes and shapes and forms. And what I've appreciated over time is you don't know unless you put yourself out there, and you can't always anticipate which people will benefit the most from you.
It's
Nor
true.
do you get to choose oftentimes where you can create the most benefit.
Right.
So I would never have envisioned that where I could probably have a positive impact is supporting the New Zealand community. But I have, I think.
Fantastic.
Certainly that's been very rewarding for me. But that required me to take a step back and not just dismiss that as a place that would value me, or dismiss that as a useful opportunity because it was in a small island in the Pacific.
I think it's incredible because sometimes I know I've had a tendency to make decisions based on somebody saying, oh, I don't think you're going to like that, or that's probably not going to be a good fit. And I've learned not to do that, that's their own opinion. It's not necessarily my experience and my opinion. I need to discover that on my own.
Well, I've always said I will challenge myself to consider any opportunity, because ultimately the other side of the table will decide if they need me or not.
That's
You know,
true.
I don't need to make that choice for them. I need to just do my part of the job, and they'll do their part of the job. And if it is the case that I'm not going to help them do what they're trying to do, I am 100% confident they will let me know. But if I don't even sit down at the table with them, then I'll never know that. And what does it really cost me? And I've found that it very rarely costs me anything, and in most cases, it's actually been quite beneficial for me. And this has allowed me, I think, to have a lot of wonderful experiences with a wide variety of communities around the world that I would not have thought of as being a place where I would have been received, accepted, but more importantly, I would be productive and use my talent in a way that was useful for what they were trying to achieve.
That's great. Now, there was a time in your life growing up where you experienced racism in Chicago?
Yeah, I would say, I don't know if the time is over, but I can certainly speak to that. Yeah, I think definitely, the experiences that you've seen over the last several weeks around the outcry, just frustration and pain and anger and sadness, is one that has been bottled up in individuals for a very long period of time. And even at a very young age, if I think about my experiences engaging with, for example, the police or the expectations, and I can think of very vivid examples where, just very physical harassment by the police for just existing was something that happened.
Just existing.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of situations where I was in a public place and police officers came and just grabbed me and dragged me into the bathroom and started yelling and screaming at me. I would have been.
And you had done nothing.
I was just standing there.
Yeah.
And and I was with my mother, which was even more. And so and it took her yelling and screaming at the police to sort of have them stop restraining me. And their excuse was I looked like someone they were looking for. And so, that was a very early memory of mine. So that systematic expectation or devaluing, I think is the best way to think about it. The systematic devaluing of another individual's humanity is certainly something that I've experienced. And, sometimes it's in very, it can occur in very salient, overt situations like that. But it can also be in those subtle slights. In my role, over my career, attend a lot of functions and, big speeches and formal affairs. And it's quite often that when I walk into that environment, the notion that I might be the speaker versus the person who's serving is oftentimes unclear, right? And so those types of things are there. And so I can certainly relate to the pain that people are expressing. And it is just that, it is pain, right? Because if you have your humanity challenged, how else would you experience that?
Yeah.
And I think it's important for others to understand where that's coming from, because if they do, then they can appreciate the logic of, well, what would it feel like for you if your humanity was challenged?
Exactly.
How would you respond to that? What would you want to have happen around that? And this really forces a dialogue around inclusion. I think will challenge many people's worldview, because what I find is oftentimes individuals at a very simple level will say, well, I think of all people as being equal and same and open. But when you look at what happens in the day-to-day environment, not every person has the ability to dictate the terms of how they're engaging.
That's true.
And I think for inclusion as a concept to play out, it is not that we agree on what the terms are, but we all have an equal playing field to determine what those terms will be. And culturally, this is challenging, because if I'm working with a group of individuals who are come from a Muslim background versus a Christian background versus a Jewish background versus a European background versus, we're not going to have a common understanding as to what is or is not right. But we certainly should be able to respect the fact that you have as much right determining what is the appropriate way to handle this as I do.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where you're able to actually create a sense of respect between individuals. And quite frankly, that oftentimes doesn't happen in many institutions. And this is where you begin to get the pain that people experience.
I think the one thing I've seen, and I've gone to some peaceful rallies here in Southern California, is there's so much pain, and that we have to be better humans. We have to be kinder, more compassionate, more empathetic, and we can't be bystanders and just watch injustice happen, because we should just stick up for everybody. You see something that doesn't seem quite right, I don't know, that's my experience.
Well, I mean,
but
I think, you cannot be in an environment where you're either overtly or, whether you're actively or inactively allowing for the dehumanization of another individual and it not impact who you are.
yeah,
Right. And that's really important for people to understand. And so you're not going to be able to walk out of that situation unscarred, regardless of which side of the equation you're on, because it's going to set up an there's going to be a sense of guilt for you, and that's real if you sit there and you were not actively doing it, but you watched it. But also it normalizes that behavior for you.
yeah,
So as you go forward, the notion that that's not going to impact how you interact with other people going forward, it's just not true. You're not going to be able to sit in an environment where one party is being alienated or discriminated against or just devalued, and then walk into another situation and not have that carry over and shape how you view that situation. It's just not. You're going to have an expectation around, well, I don't really have to put in the effort to think about the other side of you. They can deal with it. And, it becomes quite convenient for you. And that's regardless of what your background about me. But there are cases where systematically certain voices are silenced, certain perspectives are not given legitimacy, and that gets to be perpetuated over and over and over again.
for hundreds of years.
Yeah, and I think my experience has been that this is true in all societies.
Yeah.
And so that effort that requires to sort of take that step and ask, okay, I need you to listen to what you're trying to say, and I need to allow that to challenge the fact that what you're saying may not exactly be what I wanted you to say. But that doesn't mean what you're saying isn't real or legitimate or valuable. It just means it's inconvenient for me. And, I have to take that time and effort. And most people will say, well, why would I put forth that effort? Well, what's the reward? So now I have an opportunity to connect with a person, maybe work with an individual, gain value from other individuals, get respect from another person that I would not normally be able to do. So I spent, a period of my career working in Indonesia. So you can sort of say, well, that's really interesting. A Black person from Chicago living in Indonesia. Yeah, but I'm a Black Christian person from Chicago living in Indonesia, which is full of individuals who are not Black, who are not from America, and who are not Christian, they're Muslim. And it was a fantastic experience for me, but it was a daily challenge for me to say, I have a worldview around this, which is inconsistent with what they think. But I'm going to take the time to understand that, because that allows me to connect with them and see the human person.
It's humanity. Yeah.
Yeah. And that I benefited tremendously from that. But it was exhausting for me. Like every day you're going, nothing about this environment is consistent with the environment that I grew up as being completely normal, appropriate, and right. But that doesn't mean this isn't great. It was actually fantastic. And I did great work with them and developed great friendships. But I had to put forth the effort. And that's, and it's like getting in shape too, right? If I want to run a marathon, I can go out there and I can just run those 20-something out miles and my body will fall apart, right? That's not how it works.
Mine would.
It's day to day.
Yeah.
You got to get up every day. And so if you've sort of sat on the couch for 3 years and now you want to go run a marathon, you can't expect that day to day is going to be easy. And this is the same way. If you've had a habit of not including, encouraging, or engaging with, that's great that you've got this perspective to say, now I'm going to do it. But, that muscle is going to take a while to get strong.
Sure. How can we begin to heal right now? And, it's not get over this, it's learn from this and become better humans.
In my role as a social psychologist, so I study people. I'm an organizational behaviorist, is in my area of expertise, and I particularly focus that in the domain of human resource management. So I work a lot with companies on how they can develop and retain and create value through diverse workforces, and that's globally.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the context of that, within an organization, you have to systematically look at how is it that we set these processes up so that we have systematically excluded portions of society from having any voice in what we're doing.
Mm.
So if I walk into a room and it's very quick, it's typically for me a senior executive group. And if I quickly realize that there is only one type of individual or one background in that room, and I'll ask them, so talk to me about your strategy. What are you trying to do? And they will tell me the various communities that they're trying to do work in. And I will try to paint out the dissonance that experience is. You have systematically, through all the resources you have as an organization,
Mm-hmm.
excluded all of those communities from any opportunity to talk about what you're doing. Explain to me how you're going to do that well. Right. And that's a pretty confronting. You're not going to do it well. Right. And then, the next confronting aspect around that would be, well, what does that actually mean for us? And says, yes, well, let's deconstruct this. You didn't consciously start off on this path. This was institutionalized in the way you actually set up your processes. Who are you talking to when you're looking for a role? How are you evaluating people? What are you evaluating them on? Which opinions are you seeking out? So I think there's just a very basic deconstructing of the institutions that we have,
yes,
to ensure that that's part of the story. And in doing that, the communities that are there are given an opportunity to say, your point of view, your experience is valued. We view you as a peer. Tell us what you think. We will act on your activities. And so there has to be a certain level of development of trust. Right? So you're historically not giving any credibility to what I'm saying. So now you're asking me, why you're asking me. And I think that's really important in an organizational setting. And if I think about that from a societal perspective, I think you just extrapolate that. So that to me is a lot of the work that I've done. And along that time, you're going to have the individuals come up and express to you how it felt to not be involved and how it felt to be involved, and the nervousness around that, and the expectations and the fears around being perceived as being token or not being legitimate, or all those things. That's natural, right?
Yeah.
But I think as a leader in that environment, you have to remind everybody the vision of what you're trying to accomplish and how that's not going to be possible without bringing in everyone at the table. And certainly at a higher education environment, that's really critical. If you look at most universities, you'll see that the leadership of those universities oftentimes is not representative of the broader community that they have. And that's just systematic access to education. And so without overt steps to alleviate that, you just don't ever get there.
Yeah. I think that I'm beginning to see even schools with younger kids, they're overhauling their procedures and how they're treating diverse, children. And then I'm seeing it in the colleges. So it's essential. It was like a wake-up call that you're probably thinking, well, where have you all been? Because this has just been going on. Unfortunately, it took the tragic death of George Floyd. It created an avalanche of awareness of all these people that have died from police brutality. So I just hope that some positive change will come about.
Well, I think two aspects will happen around this. One is you have various communities reclaiming their humanity and saying, I have an expectation now of how I should be treated, and I don't feel afraid of expressing that. And then you have another side of the equation of individuals realizing the impact of actions. And so, this is going to create a dialogue that I think is much more genuine, but that dialogue won't go anywhere without some very overt efforts to create spaces or actions that actually legitimize this. As I said, I kind of feel that ultimately inclusion is a story around individuals having the ability to actually I have the ability to determine the nature of how we engage. Right? That's a mutual agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that one party is going to get put at a disadvantage than the other. It's just that we both have the right to determine how we engage. And
Yes.
we'll discuss that and we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. And once we've determined that, then it's okay. And then it could be anything. You know, I've had students in my classes raise some really interesting questions. The student once said, well, I have this woman who is a male. He says, I have a woman. She's fantastic. I think she'd be a great executive. But she shared with me that she wants to have a family. So, you know, I don't know if that's really going to work out. And so I go, that's interesting. So what's your goal as a leader in this organization? He says, we want to be as successful a company as possible. I said, right. And do you think having good people is going to help you do that? Yes, it will. And you've said that you think this woman is better than any other person you have for that role. Yes, I do. But you don't think you're going to offer to her because she wants to have a family. No, I have a concern around that. I said, well, you've just determined the terms of engagement. Who
Yes.
said that a person who's an executive and is successful has to work 70 hours a week? Who said they have to work 40 hours a week? My sense would be you've already figured out that her 20 hours is better than 40 hours of anybody else. So why are you not engaging with her to determine what are the terms? Did you even ask her?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you've systematically created an environment that says her experience, as in experience of a person who wants to be a mother, is not as legitimate as mine. And why should she have the ability to dictate the terms of how we engage in achieving our goal?
That is
And
so interesting.
right, you know, she
Yeah.
has just as much authority to determine it. By the way, you're dependent on her skill.
Mm-hmm.
She has just as much authority to determine the terms of engagement as you do.
Yeah.
But you've not given her the opportunity to, because you're not respecting her experience.
Whoa, what'd he say?
That's what it boils down to. He was quiet.
I'm
I
sure
think it
he
was quite
was.
confronting for him
Yeah.
because it made him realize, but that's going to take a lot of effort.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to have to figure out how to run a work environment that doesn't just mean the normative of everybody who's an executive comes in and works 60 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
But oh, wait, did you ever realize there might be some other really talented individuals that you might benefit from around that?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, if you had a better person, you wouldn't be thinking about this, but you don't. So why don't you do your job as a leader and think about it? If you're committed to the vision, if you told me that's what you wanted and the best people are going to let you get there, you already know who the best person is. You're lucky to have them. You just aren't willing to put the effort in to get them in an environment that allows them to be successful. So that's what this is going to take.
Yes, definitely. So going back to this series, Outside the Box, because you've said a lot of great things, a lot of great takeaways, but what advice would you give someone right now who is out of work?
Yeah.
Because we talked about on my other show, networking. So what advice would you give someone who's feeling really down because they're out of work right now?
First thing I would recommend is that your employment situation is not your identity. That's really important for people to understand. So much of who we are is shaped by what we do, and our self-efficacy, our standing, our image is shaped by what we do. But your employment situation does not dictate your identity. It's not an indication of who you are as a person. It's just an indication of an economic environment. And so why I stress that is oftentimes individuals get into a cycle where they'll start saying, well, I'm not even going to bother apply. Nobody's going to want me. Each situation is a unique situation. They're not related. They're not dependent upon each other. Your employment situation is not your identity. You're just as skilled every time you apply for every job. And never, whether you've been denied for 7 jobs in the past, nothing about that took away any of the skills that you bring to this 8th opportunity. And so that resilience perspective is really important, but more, I think even bigger than just being resilient, it's an appreciating your identity and your confidence in yourself. So the second component around that would be very open to what opportunity may exist. We are, one of the interesting things about networking is that we're very comfortable going to individuals we know, and typically the people we know are the individuals that are like us, and we typically are very comfortable expressing to them a need or asking for their assistance, which is great. And if they know us and they like us, they're going to do everything they can. But one of the challenges about social networks, particularly networks that are very similar, is all the opportunities that they know are all the opportunities you already know.
Mm.
So you're only going to get so far with that because you're not actually expanding the pie. Where it becomes a little more interesting, and there's a great article, and if you think about it, that looks at the value of weak ties or individuals you have relationships with that are typically are dissimilar to you, that are not as common in their interactions as you. And what is your level of comfort expressing needs to them? Because what that does is it expands the horizon of opportunities that you may have. And so feeling comfortable going out, perhaps of your comfort zone, and talking to others, dissimilar others in environments that you would not normally think about what you're trying to accomplish, what that does is it opens up a lot more doors for you.
Yes.
And there's a very seminal study that shows that people who utilize those weak ties, those more extended interactions as a way to look for jobs, tend to find more jobs, and they tend to find better jobs, and they find jobs faster. And so this is that strength of weak ties argument. But that requires you to sort of step out of that comfort zone of being around people that are sort of similar to you and have a common strong connection with you. So don't underestimate the opportunities in spaces that you're not familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
And in some cases, that's not, maybe that's moving to a different location, but oftentimes it's not. It's just talking to different parts of your community that you would never have envisioned speaking with, or looking at opportunities in industries that you never thought could benefit from what you bring to the table. And I think finally, and this kind of goes without saying in some cases, don't be afraid to continually invest in yourself.
Oh, yes.
So skill always matters. It translates to almost every environment and every situation. Don't be afraid to continually invest in yourself. And that may mean taking in a job where when you come in, you're not comfortable because you can't say without a shadow of a doubt that you're the most skilled person in the environment, but will you have a learning orientation?
Yeah.
And in a knowledge economy, which is certainly the economy that we're working on, a service-based economy, ultimately it's not just about what you know, it's about how willing are you to continue to add new skills to your repertoire that matter. And again, that
can
brings
tell.
more confidence. Yeah,
and they can tell your confidence, and if you say, I'm taking a course on Coursera or LinkedIn, like they can see it.
Or just if you have a job or you're starting off in a role, just acknowledging, no, I've not done this before. I want to really get good at this. Will you be willing to give me a little extra time and coach me on how to do this, or give me some direction as to how to go about doing it? Just acknowledging that. And many times people would feel uncomfortable to say, I'm new here, there's not a lot of employment security. Do I really want to express that I don't know? I think the good employers are going to say, well, whatever we're doing today, we know we're not going to be doing 3 months from now. Give me the person that's willing to continually say, okay, I know I haven't seen that before. How do I get better at that? That's going to be the employee that I think is able to generate a lot of value over time. So I think those three things would be key. But I go back to that first one, which is your employment status is not an indication of your identity. That's just an economic outcome. And each situation is a distinct one. Do not in any way, shape, or form discount what you're bringing to the table, and don't let somebody else as well.
Yeah. No, it's great advice, because right now there's people that have, like I said, lost their jobs, or they're working remotely, and they might think, oh, I don't even like what I do, but how am I going to pivot? But sometimes when you talk to people, and I'm finding that I'm having a lot more conversations on Zoom than ever before, but I always encourage people to talk to people face to face like this. Don't just email, connect. Because you never know with a conversation what someone might say or add or spark something in you, or might ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'll never forget my advisor said that to me. I was trying to figure out my major. What interests you? And there was no wrong answer. And then someone might be able to mentor you a little bit.
I typically find that it takes a lot of courage for a person to share their dream with another individual. We don't want to get it crushed. We want to protect it. But I find that when individuals are willing to share their aspiration with others, people get excited by that. People get inspired by that. People want to be around others that inspire them, and they want to be a part of somebody's inspirational journey.
Yes.
And so, I can completely understand, you want to kind of cherishing and protecting that passion that you have. Nobody wants to get their feelings hurt or their spirit crushed. But I've often found that when I've been able to have the confidence to share my aspiration with someone, they get inspired by that. They actually want to, they want to be a part of that. They want to be able to say, I knew that person when. They want to be able to say, I played a role. And not that they get tangible benefit from it, but we want to be a part of others' success. So I agree with that. Don't hesitate to share that dream with other individuals, because you never know. Some cases, the worst that can happen, they can say is, oh, that's interesting, and they kind of move on.
Right.
But other cases, they go, wow, that's really inspiring. I never met someone who was thinking about doing that. I know someone who can help you with that.
Exactly.
Certainly as an educator, I think one of the great rushes of my job is I'm in an environment where you have a bunch of people who are coming to terms with what their dream is every day. And as an educator, when they feel comfortable sharing that with you, you can help them. And that's when you get the rush. The greatest joy in the world is to see what a former student is doing.
Yes.
And, to know that you had a conversation with them when that was just sort of a beginning to form as an idea, and you see them run with it, there's no greater passion or joy than that.
You bet. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, certainly would love for them to come see me on LinkedIn, follow me on Twitter, and get a sense of some of the things that I'm involved in and that I find really important in the work that I'm doing. And even more importantly, perhaps share some ideas or thoughts that I can build upon as well.
That'd be great. Well, thank you so much. I've enjoyed talking to you. I loved having you on KUCI, but this is even better.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.